I'm John Snead. Uh, I've been a scout since 1963 and a cartographer since 1977. Those of you who know me may know that I spent 40 years at LSU making maps. I was the mapping director of the Louisiana Geological Survey. And then kind of a marriage of my scouting and cartography interest, I've been collecting scout maps from the beginning. Now, I started off with traditional paper maps. I've got about 1,000 of them. Then I moved on to maps on neckerchiefs and bandanas. In the 60s and 70s, putting your camp map on your camp neckerchief was a thing. And now I've got about 325 of them, and I'm still finding them. Later on, I started realizing that there were certain patches that were actually maps. Started collecting them. In recent years, there have been maps printed on clothing and objects by scouting. There are digital maps and geographic systems online. And finally, map-shaped patches. These are the paper maps. You're familiar with them. They exist for camps and jamborees, NOACs, just about anything. I keep finding lots of these. It's been a really fun collection. They're taking up a lot of space, I can tell you that. Map neckerchiefs you've probably seen. They're also a lot of fun. Maps on patches are pretty cool. There are a number of patches out there that the patch itself is a map. There's some really nice one from Philmont. It's also a Philmont-shaped map patch. Some of the others I've got there. Maps on objects. Here we've got a map on a blanket from the 2019 World Jamboree. You've probably all seen the map on a t-shirt from the National Jamboree. There are socks with maps on them from both Philmont and Summit now. That little shot glass there, believe it or not, has a map printed on the inside of it. It's a Philmont shot glass. And the water bottle over there is also a Philmont map. So these kind of maps are kind of bulky to collect. I got a couple of bins full of these kind of things. Digital maps are out there now. You can download the PDF maps from Summit from their website, and they're interactive. You can zoom in and out and everything. For Philmont, you can download the KMZ files and put them into Google Earth, where you can, change the colors, change the layerings, turn on and off what you want, and sort of make your own custom map of Philmont. It's pretty cool. Then we get to map-shaped patches. You can find them out there that are shaped like the shape of the camp, or the shape of the council, country shapes, continent shapes. Everything is out there. And that brings us to state-shaped patches. They started showing up in the 1950s, pretty much cut-edge twill patches. 60s and 70s, they started going to rolled edge patches. There were some issues with that. We'll get to in a minute. In the 1980s, the laser and hot needle cut patches emerged, and that really changed the game. State-shaped maps patches from the 1950s are usually twill and cut edge. And at this time, these patches, a patch manufacturer might have a die to punch out his 3-inch rounds and rectangles and their flap shape and things like that. But odd-shaped patches required hand cutting with scissors. And that made them a little more expensive, but they're out there. In fact, quite a number of them are out there. In the 60s, rolled edge patches came along, and that introduced a problem. It saved the issue of there being stray threads at the sides of your patch from the scissor cutting, but it sort of forced them to go to stylized shapes, because running that narrowed edge around an odd shaped patch only works if you've got corners you can make. And this one actually is also, they took some liberties with the shape. They wanted to get Anthony Wayne on there, so they just, made Indiana a little wider. And over on your right, you can see a modern computer designed patch with a hot needle cut edge. When this came out, there was a new run on state shaped patches, in the 80s and 90s. A lot of state shaped patches came out because suddenly they didn't have to be hand cut. They didn't have to be hand marrowed. The machine could cut them out, and they become affordable again. So we got a lot more state shaped patches to collect, which is good for the state shaped patch collector. Features of state shaped patches is pretty much the size, which in cartography we call it scale. The shape of the patch, which can be accurate or not, and the detail level of the patch. It's related to shape, but it's a separate thing. I'll show you some examples in a minute. All types of state shaped patches, a lot of scout events, historic trails. There are OA lodges with state shaped patches and conclaves. And they come in several forms. We're pretty much all familiar with the single patch that's shaped like a state, but there are also states where you have to put 2 or more patches together to build a state. There are also patches with multiple states on them. An example of scale. These Nevada patches range from small pocket size to large pocket size to jacket patch. And this is one of the things when you're trying to put a map together, because a lot of the people who collect state shaped patches envision putting them together into a map. And scale is huge. I've met a lot of state shaped collectors who just keep one patch from each state, and they're going to be surprised when they start trying to put a map together. It's hard to do because they don't make these maps, these patches to fit each other. You have to find the ones that work. So I collect all state shaped patches. I'm constantly upgrading and finding a better shape and a better scale. Here's some examples of shape. You can see the Tennessee map up there on the right, is fairly accurate shape of Tennessee. The Bearwater Gap patch, well, they need a little more space to get their design in there. So they just stretched the Tennessee up a little taller to make it work. It's, excuse me, it's still recognizably Tennessee, but it is not an accurate shape. You can also see on the Louisiana patches down there on the right, the Louisiana Scout badge. I think the designer of that just sort of roughed it out of memory. It's pretty crude, as you can see by comparing it to the more recent conclave patch next to it. Georgia, can I say about the Kennesaw Mountain Trail, but damn, it doesn't look much like Georgia at all. In fact, you probably wouldn't recognize that as Georgia if it didn't say Kennesaw Mountain on it. The Philmont Expedition patch is a little bit better, but it's still, I wonder what he used as a model for this state shape, because it's just not really the shape of Georgia. You can see on the right there what an accurate shape of Georgia with better detail looks like. So you'll find all kinds of shape variations, which is why I collect them all, because I'm always having to swap them out for a better shape. Detail level is another one. The West Virginia up there, the Friendship Camporee patch is not only an inaccurate shape, but it's got a very low detail level, as you can see by the more modern one on the right, which has a very good shape and a very good detail level. The Mississippi patch is a good example of how you have to stylize a shape to put a rolled edge on it. Most of us state shape collectors aren't fond of rolled edges because they usually aren't very accurate. You can see by the cut edge Mississippi patch that you can really get some detail in these days. And the designer pays good attention. He can not only get a detail, but a very accurately shaped map. The New York maps are interesting. The older one has Lake Erie on it, which I think is kind of cool. But the rest of the shape is just vaguely the shape of New York. Um, Next to it is a Jamboree troop numeral in the shape of New York. And the shape is better, but they kind of squared it in on the western side. But they did add Long Island, which I appreciate as a cartographer. A lot of people leave that off, even on paper maps when they're doing New York. Wisconsin, geez, that Game Haven Council, they reduced it all to arcs and lines, and not very many of them. It's recognizable as Wisconsin, but it's I'm you can see by the other one that it's just not very detailed. Types, as I'd mentioned before, lots of um, event patches. Uh, some of the historic hiking trails are very well designed, solid embroidered pieces. There are some really nice OA pieces that are stake shaped. The Inali Lodge is very early for such a nice design. A number of conclaves have done stake shapes. Here's where I should mention the friendship camporees. Uh, a lot of state shape collectors get started with friendship camporees because there are a million of them. They are out there and you can find them. Friendship camporee was an event where troops were invited from all over. They held it in a different state every year, and most years they issued a state-shaped patch. Some of the patches are pretty good, some of them aren't, but none of them were designed to fit together. They're all pretty much pocket-sized, a few jacket patches, but collectors, after a while, tend to get away from the friendship camporee patches, not only because the shapes are inconsistent, but because some people don't really consider them a scout patch. This event apparently was not a BSA approved event. They don't like things that compete with their jamborees and their high adventure bases for troops traveling around the country. But in the 70s, there were a number of these camporees and into the early 80s, and state shaped patches from them are out there. You've probably all seen them. There are patches out there that have multiple states on them. Then at the bottom, you can see all the states in the Confederacy, I mean, the southern region, all together in one patch. Uh, the other two patches are kind of interesting. One is that Missouri is kind of a scarce patch. It's kind of hard to find. Kansas is easier. Uh, so a lot of us have this Missouri on our map, and we got Kansas covered up with another Kansas patch. This was on my map for a number of years, but I've upgraded to a better Missouri. But sometimes these patches come in handy and you can use them when making a patch map. The East District camporee is a very cool one for state-shaped collectors because it has Massachusetts, portion of Connecticut, and Rhode Island on it. Rhode Island is hard. There's some Rhode Island shaped patches, but they're pocket-sized patches. And when you're trying to put together a map, you need Rhode Island the size of a quarter. And nobody's going to make a patch like that. But with this patch, you can have Massachusetts and Rhode Island right there on the same patch, and it'll fit your map. And you can you can overlay it with a better Connecticut, which is what I did on my map. You'll see in a minute. Some map patches are built up of multiple patches. The Kentucky and Louisiana are two patches to make up the state. The Montana is four. I've got a Kentucky jacket patch made of six pieces. There are others out there. This really attractive Montana jacket patch is huge. It's like an 11 by 17. It's made up of seven fully embroidered patches. Uh, this this section did this for years, and patches like this exist for Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, as well as Montana. Really, really nice patches. Here's a 13-piece Oklahoma, also very large, but kind of cool. And this is a dandy. This is a map of Pennsylvania made of county-shaped patches. Iroquois District, for about a 12 or 13-year period, made county-shaped patches for every county in Pennsylvania. And they were designed with the intent of fitting them together and make them fit. The fit ain't good in some places because there are some rolled edge ones and some cut edge ones that were made by different manufacturers over the years, but they were intended to go together, and they go together well. Some of the smaller counties are grouped together. You'll see some of these counties have 2, 3, or 4 counties all together on a patch. But when I ran across this, you can't believe how delighted I was. And the OA two-piece patches that are always popular at NOACs and such. And some of them have been state shapes too. You can see here several of the ones that have been done. Most of them are pretty accurate shapes. Indiana, again, has been stretched a little wider, but it's a noticeable Indiana. The Kansas is pretty cool because I had this patch for a while before I realized it was a state shape. You got to turn it on its side and like, bam, it's Kansas. Scarcity varies on these patches. I pretty much got them grouped into 5 categories. These are the easy ones. You can find these shapes easy, especially Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Man, those Midwesterners are proud of their state shapes. There are dozens and dozens of these patches available. Lots of sizes, lots of detail levels and shape, but they're out there. These are the easy ones. This is the available state shapes. You can find these. If you're looking for state shapes, you will find these patches. Some of them are a little scarcer than others, but they're out there. They're gettable. I should say they're available. These are the ones I call gettable. These are not common. You'll look for a while to run these down, but they're out there. They're findable. And most of the dedicated state shape collectors have them. These are the rare ones. These can be hard to find. I still need South Dakota. Uh, I still need Maryland and Delaware. Uh, and we'll get to Maryland and Delaware, which I call purple unicorns, because they may not exist. None of the state shape collectors I have talked to has Maryland and Delaware. Most of them don't have the Dakotas, but the Dakotas exist. I have North Dakota and I have seen South Dakota. I just hadn't run it down yet. But Delaware and Maryland just don't have any shapes available. Maryland is such a convoluted shape that it may have dismayed potential designers because it was going to be expensive and kind of awkward to put on a pocket or something. But Delaware is not that bad. It's hard to believe that a Delaware patch has not been made, but if they're out there, I haven't found them. If any of y'all know about them, I'd sure like to run them down. There's some related patches that I collect and some others do too. Uh, I'd like a District of Columbia. I've got a couple of diamond shaped patches from DC, but they're full diamonds. They don't have the western part of it cut along the Potomac because the original District of Columbia was a full diamond, but they later took off the Virginia side of it and just left the Maryland side. And I haven't found a patch of that shape yet. Puerto Rico patches exist. They're I'd say gettable. They're gettable. Uh, Hawaii being a series of islands, there's never going to be a state shape of Hawaii. There may be a Hawaii map patch sometime, uh, but there are individual patches of Hawaiian islands. I've got two of them. I don't know if any others exist, but I'm always looking. Um, Also, the Canadian provinces are out there in scout patches, and I've been picking them up over the years too. Now, are these state shapes? Uh, these are patches that have design elements that extend past the edge of the state and sort of mar the outline of it. Uh, and so they're really not usable if you're trying to put a map together with them. But it's clear that people were trying to make a state shaped patch, so I collect them. Uh, I just really can't use them in maps. Although I'll tell you, I did use that Virginia for a while until I got a better Virginia. I just covered up that sash on the upper part of it with West Virginia. Um, but now I've got a Virginia. Now, what I think is a really clever patch is that Washington patch that the Spokane Scout Shop turned into a CSP. I thought that was very clever. Recent jamborees, we've seen these jamboree sets as people do JSP and jacket patch sets uh, based on state shapes. Again, the JSPs mar the edge of the shape, but they're clearly recognizable state shapes. So I collect them, and also the parasite JSPs that come with them. California and New Jersey in the same style. Uh, I particularly like California because they've got geographic elements. You can see the Central Valley and the mountains and some of the lakes and stuff. Um, Cartographers like to see things like that. This is an interesting one. I got a number of Michigan patches, but none of the Michigan patches have the Upper Peninsula on them because it's separated by the Great Lakes from the rest of Michigan, kind of makes it difficult. But Agam Lodge made a jacket patch composed out of what, one, two, three, four, five, six smaller patches to make up a jacket patch of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Too big to ever put on a map, but very cool. Agam Lodge also did this one, which I really like. I've got this up here for two reasons. These are the Great Lakes that touch Michigan, and you can see the shape of Michigan, including the Upper Peninsula, by their absence when you put these lake-shaped patches together properly. And this makes me realize that the Hawaii could be done this way. If somebody made, the 6 or 7 main Hawaiian islands at the right scale as separate pieces, they could be put together into a map. And geez, I hope somebody does that someday. You're going to run along non-scouting state shape patches, and you'll find them in with scout patches. And police and law enforcement love state shapes. There's lots of those out there. but you can usually recognize them because they'll have a badge on it. They'll have police and really large letters or sheriff or something. Uh, but there are a lot of law enforcement state shapes out there. A lot of state parks make state shaped patches, and these end up in scout collections because the kids camp there, and they're souvenir patches from the states that you find in souvenir shops and stuff. Uh, they're not scout patches, but there are collectors who use these as placeholders until they can replace it with a state patch. They're not non-scouting events out there. For years, I had a Montana on my map that was a really attractive Montana-shaped patch of a snowmobile race. This patch came to me with other scouting patches and was represented as a scouting event. I later found out it wasn't a scouting event. So there are other people besides scouts that make patches that they can sew on jackets. Where do you find them? Well, where you find any patch, basically. You can find them at traderies. You can find them on eBay. One thing about eBay is that the search engine doesn't help you much. You can search for state shape and it'll bring up a few, but and you can even go through and say Alaska shape, Arkansas shape, Alabama shape, and maybe turn up a few more from the descriptions and keywords. But most of the people that list these patches, they list them by what the event is or what the lodge is or whatever. And they don't note that they're shaped like a state. If clever dealers did that, they could sell more patches, probably because state shape collectors are looking for them on eBay, but we got to run them down. You can talk to state shape collectors because most of us have duplicates. I got a gallon bag full of state shape duplicates that I haul around and trade with people. You'll find them in your own accumulation. I guarantee you, if you've been collecting patches 10 years, you got state shapes in your dollar box, you got state shapes in this bin or that bin. They're out there. If you're looking for them, you can find them. Prices go all over the map, but it's a pretty cheap collection. Common state shapes can be found in dollar boxes. The average price for these state shapes is $3 to $8. They're cheaper at a tradery than they are on eBay. Tougher state patches can cost 10 to 25 if the seller is aware. Most of them aren't. You'll find them overpriced, you'll find them underpriced. But, you know, it's a rare state shaped patch that costs you much money. The ones that do are like conclaves, and they can cost you $40, especially one from there's a Rhode Island conclave that everybody needs, and it's from the 60s, and that's a $40 patch. There are some OA patches that can cost hundreds of dollars that are state shapes. Here's a Wabaningo state shape. Cost you 500 or more in mint condition, and it's a fine piece. I've had them in the past. I don't at present, and I don't put it on my map because I think my other map patches would be offended by its presence being with its lofty price, just because it was in the WAB book, whereas most of the state shapes are pretty ordinary, but it is a cool patch and it's out there. Got to write a big check. And assembling a map. Because most of us who are collecting the state shapes dream of putting a map together. And when you actually start doing it, yeah, you run into issues. One thing, it's going to be big. My map is in a frame that's 3 feet by 4 feet. It's big and awkward to move around and hard to find a tripod easel that'll hold it, you know. But that's just the size the patches are. It's going to be a big map. Shape is going to be a compromise. None of these patches are going to fit perfectly. You're going to end up with gaps and overlaps, and that's one reason I collect all the ones I can get my hands on, because sometimes you swap one out and then you got to swap out two or three that are next to it. And you're always trying to find a better fit to make your map work. And this would be my map. It's where I am right now. It's fixing to be revised again soon, because I've got about a half a dozen newer acquisitions that I think are going to fit better on this map. And I just recently got in North Dakota, so it's just sort of thrown up there into place, and it's got gaps all around it and doesn't leave much room for South Dakota when I run it down. But you run into some other issues. One you can see is that Canada is a different scale from the United States, because Canada is just bloody huge, and making province patches, they'd all have to be jacket patches, and that just doesn't exist right now to be the same scale to fit with the United States and make a map of North America. But they all exist. You can get province shaped patches for all of Canada. Excuse me. You can see that we all need a bigger Alaska. We all need a bigger California. Um, thank goodness there are a lot of Texas jacket patches to fit. So the big states, every time I meet somebody from California, I say, man, y'all need to make a jacket patch for some event. Make California a little bigger. And we need Alaska that's a lot bigger. It may happen someday, but right now, the big states are kind of a problem when you're trying to fit a map together. If you look at this, you can see that the western states are bigger states, and there are more gaps out there. It's harder to fit the bigger states together because they're not all the exact same scale. And in the east, we've got some overlap because the states are smaller. And most of these patches are designed to fit on a pocket. So you end up with big states being too small and small states being too big when you're trying to fit this together. But you can get something that's recognizable, and I think this is. Now, this particular map, you can see that the Canada map is on a conic projection. The lines of latitude are arcs. The United States map is on a Mercator projection, where the latitudes are straight and parallel lines. I'm fixing to redo this map soon, and I'm going to turn the United States into more of a conic projection, because I think I can close up a lot of those big gaps out west by turning it into a conic projection. Um, I'm not so sure how that's going to affect me in the East yet, because it's a different set of issues in the East. It's hard to fit them all in already without New England just being bigger than Texas. But that's what we're left with. I've still got to fit Delaware and Maryland in here someday if I ever get them. So the takeaway I want to give map collectors, state shape collectors who want to make a map, is that there are issues that you'll have to deal with, and so it helps to have a lot of patches to work with when you're trying to put these together, and you'll be changing them from time to time.